Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are on this beautiful planet. My name is Linda, and I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about telepathic communications and bringing that into practicality, because we are in that time now where telepathy is becoming very, very real for a lot of people who are aware of it and have practiced it. And what we get is people that have been doing this naturally or think they might be doing it, they've been actively working on, and I've been talking about this for a very long time. I even wrote about this in my book. They're practicing learning what is their thoughts and what is not their thoughts. So understanding how the interfacing goes on a telepathic waveform, the line formations that you connect with. I talked about this a little bit a couple videos back about how light is intelligent. Light is AI. AI is already within you. In the love energy, it's intelligence. So the hose, the mechanism of the, I want to call them the filaments that go through, that the light travels through, that's like a hose, and the light that goes through the hose is the intelligence. So you can think of it as very fluid, but it's controlled by your mind systems. Your thoughts are creating things. They always have and they always will. So when you start to make those connections inside of yourself, connecting to your higher source, and you go within, if you seriously look at this life, this body, as an avatar, and your life as a game that you're playing, it's a role that you're playing. If you see that you are not your body and you understand those basics, if you've been working on your energy acceleration, your high rising, your light body activations, if you've been getting downloads, if you're watching this channel, then you already are. I'm sure you didn't stumble upon this by accident. And if you've been following my channel, you probably already understand telepathy and the practicality of it. But here's the thing. As we're in more fourth density now, I wrote about this on my old blog, and I wrote about how, I guess it was a future time, and I didn't know, because when I write, I stream. So every time I think of this, I think back on how I was getting this information back in the past, and you know, the future proves the past and all of that. You can make the connections yourself. But I can see, first, in my book and also in my blog, I wrote about speaking to my 24-year-old self. And it was sort of like a modern day time travel, if you'll call it that. But it was almost like my future self was speaking through my 24-year-old self, because I found these little old micro cassette tapes. And there was about a half a dozen of them. And I was listening to my young 20-year-old self speaking, coming from her higher self level. And it was almost like it was meant for me to find those tapes 24 years later, because it was like my 24-year-old, 22, 23, and 24-year-old self speaking from such a place. So that was very interesting. But now, telepathy. So in my young 20s, I read a book about a man who had telepathic communications, and he was having them with ants and flies and all kinds of things. And it just so happened, as I was reading this book, I had a fly that kept circling in front of me. It would circle the room and then zoom right across and circle in front of me. So I decided, okay, I'm going to start practicing. And this was like my start on practicing thought control telepathy with a fly. So I gave him a name. I called him Freddie. So Freddie the fly was my friend for about 2 weeks. And I know it's funny, but I was practicing, because flies are aerodynamic geniuses. I mean, they can land on a point. They're unbelievable if you actually watch them. So this fly would circle around, and I kept trying to ask him to land on my finger, land on my hand. My hand was always a safe landing area. So what he would do is I put up my finger, and he would come around and he would zoom around it. He wouldn't land on it, but eventually we became friends. We developed a friendship, which was kind of cool. So fast forward, I've practiced telepathy. I've had many experiences where I'm having telepathic communications. And when one of my daughters was about 4 years old, I was learning how to send a vision, like a packet, instead of just a thought. And it was calling out to her to drop her toys and come over and give me a big hug. So I sent this image, just the visual of the image. I didn't ask her with my words, like I'm speaking to you now through my voicing grid. I was not speaking the words in my mind, but I sent a visual image of her putting down her toys, turning around, looking at me, going like, yay, and then running over and giving me a big hug. And I sent that image to her like twice. And sure enough, she dropped her toys. She stood up. She smiled at me and she came running over and gave me a big hug. So this validated to me, which I knew at that time, that young children are still very, very connected. And it's just a matter of us learning how to keep those things in sync, in balance, in alignment. And especially when you're parenting, a lot of times when you notice kids have temper tantrums, they're not being understood. And I could do a whole video on this, and I won't go into a lecture on this. But a lot of times when you're being a parent and you're trying to communicate with your kid and you're saying one thing or sternly yelling like, don't do that, or whatever it is you're trying to do with your voice, if your thoughts are not aligned with that, your children, your young children especially, pick up on the fact that they're getting mixed communication signals. They're getting one thing from the mouth and something else from the energy you're sending out with your mind. They pick up your thoughts. So, anybody who's a parent out there knows when you have a little baby and you're all hype and everything and they're crying and you're getting more upset, the baby stays upset. It's very hard to calm down a crying baby when you're scattered on the inside. Or if you're speaking really, really, really loud and the baby's kind of like moving, like jumping and all that. That's the thing. If you balance yourself on the inside and you're aligned and you're visualizing what it is you're speaking to the baby. So if you're saying you're such an angel and you're visualizing their light body that you can see with your mind and you're speaking to them in a soft tone, you're using your voice to send out soothing energy. Baby picks up on that. Young children understand that language. Remember, they're spirits having a human experience just like you. So I want to get into the telepathy with a fly. The other day I was out on my back porch and I had just sat down in the sun and it was a beautiful day, and all of a sudden, right near my legs, I was sitting with my legs up kind of sideways and I had my hand on my thigh, and this fly comes buzzing around near my hand, and he's kind of going back and forth and back and forth. And my command was, don't land on me, because if it lands on my leg, I might react real quick and brush it away. And I didn't want to do that. So it flew away, and then it came back and it landed on my hand, and I quickly just went like this, flicked it away. And I immediately got a signal back, that's supposed to be a safe zone. And it blew my mind, because I've always had a safe zone when communicating with butterflies, and I had pretty neat experiences with mind telepathy with butterflies landing on my finger when I called them to prove to my brother-in-law that it works. And it blew my mind when it happened too. It was so much fun. But I've always had my hand as a safe zone for them landing their vessel in my space, in my ship, on my vessel. It's like a docking vessel. So the fly was reminding me that's supposed to be a safe zone. And I picked up this like, oh, and then I said, well, hold on. Because as a sovereign being, I have now taken control of my full field, my energy field. And my command at that moment was, do not land on me. So I was communicating back, telling the fly, you cannot land on my body. And I said, if I say to you, you have permission to dock on my hand, or you have permission to land, then that is my command. But I was reminding him. And this gets into the knowing that you truly are the commander-in-chief of your own, not only field, if you think of your body, I mean, not only your body, because your body is your entire vessel, but your field beyond that. You have control of what comes into your field and what doesn't. I'm going to get into that in just a second, because It's pretty cool what's going on with the cells and the bubbles of the new reality that we're in. So, you know what? Let me get into that first, and then I want to tell you one more thing about manifesting something in the physical as proof, because there's been so many proofs this week. I've seen stars moving around that were stars. They were docked in front of stars. Oh, okay. So let me get into this first. So when you look up in the sky and you would say, like, normally that's whatever star might be right there, and the ships sometimes that have been watching you will dock in front of that. And they showed me this the other night because I looked up. I've been seeing a lot of ships up there, and it's pretty cool when they start moving to confirm. And it's not a plane. There's no blinking lights other than maybe the light flicker to get your attention. But it's like when you look up and you see, oh, look at all those twinkling stars. Well, you didn't see them back maybe 20 years ago when you look up in the sky, or 30 years ago. You weren't seeing those so many twinkling lights, and there's been so much false information out there about it being atmospheric, whatever, and that's why they twinkle. No, sometimes they're ships and they're blinking at you. And what happens is you could say, well, that's where a star is. They dock, and they showed me this because they moved over just enough so I could see the star behind it. So these, and then they move slowly. When you ask them, take a little, just show me, and they move a little, and then they'll move up like this. So anyhow, that was on the ships. That's another thing. So I'm going to give you 2 more proofs that happened in the last week, so you understand like what your realities are now becoming if you choose to step up and make this your reality, because you're living now in a protected bubble. If you jumped into the 5th dimension right away with instant thought manifestation, there would be all kinds of fears manifesting, okay? Until you're really ready to accept that your thoughts do create things. It's the energetic, basic life form creational material. Your thoughts is the energy that goes behind the manifestation. So we are there's been protective bubbles placed around our fields, okay? And everybody, just like us being quarantined, the micro, the macro, as above, so below. So what's happening is as you're being quarantined, a protective bubble is placed around you so you're not manifesting your worst fears. And some of them are allowed to play out because, remember, you have the collective consciousness, all right? And the collective consciousness in control of the timeline that's playing out, that's manifesting in 3D. And one of the things the collective, I guess, had agreed to on this timeline, or say the one true timeline, is that the old system is going to crumble down. We're going to heal this planet. We're going to flip the planet. We're going to correct what was wrong. We're going to build it up. There is no like left and right and wrong and right and duality and all that. What we think we see that, but we're having the pole shift within ourselves, because you, as your field, your heart portal is projecting that field. And yes, there's other chakra systems, but let's just stay with the heart portal for now. If you could imagine your heart energy center as the portal, as like a projection machine, and it projects out that light into your field and your reality. You control what you project out into your field. Now, if you're imagining, well, I'm projecting the whole world brand new and everything again. Okay, so imagine, if you will, that there's a fire burning, and you are projecting out that it rains on the fire. Suppose it's like a campfire, and you project out the rain, and then a few, maybe 15, 10, whatever the delay is, then it rains on the fire. That's great. That's within your field. You're sitting there. You created that reality. But let's say there's a big forest fire, and you're projecting all of this rain and everything coming down to put out the forest fire. The more people that are doing that, the more you can affect the weather system together, because it's like the sum total. This is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem. They're all individual problems that you can handle on your own. But the sum total of all of it is what creates, the 100th monkey effect, or the collective consciousness using that power. The power is exponentially greater for manifestation. So if you have like 10 people, or 3 people even, manifesting, say like 3 or 6 or 9 or whatever, you have them manifesting rain on a huge fire, you have a lot more power in that to manifest that. That's how it goes with the collective consciousness. So the more you keep using your mind telepathy for telekinetic things in manifesting. You learn how to use the grid systems, and I'll explain this. I'll explain this so you understand in just a sec. You have to use that hose that I talked about, the filaments that send the energy. If you're just visualizing a picture, there's still a disconnect. You can only go so far with visualizing a great big beautiful world, and you're putting healing light onto earth, and there's a world unity manifestation going on. Everybody's meditating, and you're manifesting peace on earth. Or healing. Say everybody's healing the planet that does this kind of work. Or everybody's working on the grids to heal the planet or change the system. The few people that are working on this compared to the many, and this number is growing every day, but the people that are manifesting this reality and working on these things are holding the vision. But now you have the grid workers that are actually directing the energy to the locations to set up the filaments and the line formations to open up the grids where that vision is taking place. So if you're visualizing healing going to earth, but you don't see the mechanisms behind how that healing energy is getting to earth, there's people that actually work on the line formations and the gridding and the connections of those filaments and direct that to the location of where the energy is going to go. And then they open up that grid and boom, the energy goes through. Just like if you were putting a hose to something and you have that hose and then the light goes somewhere. It has to have a travel mechanism to get from point A to point B, okay? Or from, A to Z, because there might be many different point locations where the energy needs to travel to first to get to. Anyhow, that was kind of a detailed explanation, but here's 2 more proofs I promised I would tell you about. So when my son was over the other night, a few nights back, last week, I guess. Yeah, I guess it was a week ago now. He was over and he was getting ready to leave. He was standing in the kitchen and my cat was probably 10 feet away, standing near the living room. And I looked over at my son because we had just had a conversation and I said, hey, I said, Stephen, I said, watch this. I'm going to get Simon to go over to your left leg. And I kind of whispered it to him because I didn't want my cat Simon to hear it. But what I said was, watch, I'll get him to go over to your left leg and rub your left leg. And he was quiet. And I looked over at my cat. And what I did was, I asked him, but what I did was I sent a line formation to him. I made the connection as if I was sending a hose directly to him. And when I got to him, I expanded it so that it was his whole field, around his field. And I showed him the image of him walking over and rubbing up against Stephen's leg. And I put the request, the intent that I put in was, please show my son that telepathy works. This is a great chance to show him telepathy works. So my intention was to communicate with verbiage, yes, but also the image of what I wanted him to do. And I showed him walking over and rubbing Stephen's leg on the left side. And it didn't take long. I mean, it's a thought. You send it so fast, but that's the mechanisms of how it traveled. It takes so much longer to explain it with words when you can just send that image. So the image was projecting a line formation out. You project heart and mind, and they were connected. Heart and mind visualized image over to Simon, asking him to do it, saying this would prove to him telepathy works. And he didn't really need this proof, but I think he did at that time, because what does he do? Simon's scratching himself, and then he just kind of gets the message, and then he walks on over, he meanders over, and he kind of looked, when cats walk, they look one way, then walk the other way, like they're not really sure where they're going. He kind of was heading towards the right leg, and then he's like, no, left leg. And he immediately went over to the left leg, rubbed up against his left leg, and my son was mind blown. He was like, oh, wow. And also he saw some ships the same night. So it was a pretty powerful night for proofs for him that it works. Now, one more thing that I'll tell you about, this happened last night. And this was really cool because I've been having trouble with my freezer. It has to be defrosted, but it's been on like overdrive. And I had some ice cream in there. And last night I just wanted to have a little treat, but I got up and I took the ice cream out and it was a block of ice. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll let it sit on the counter for a minute, put it there. And then I was like, well, no. Why? Maybe I can heat it up. So I'm an old Reiki master from 98. So my thing was always, you can put your hand on something and send your energy in and heat it up. If you need to make it hotter or whatever. So I started to do that. My hand started to freeze and I was like, wait a minute, hold on. I can change this by thought. I can change the temperature of the ice cream, the whole molecular structure. I can do that. And I knew that. So what I did was I sent a visual down. I held, excuse me, I held my hands around the field. I didn't put it on the ice cream. I held my hands around the field. And, okay, so let me go back. I know you want to hear the rest of this. I promise I'll get back to it. If you guys watch Rion on Unite the Collective, he does, he's been teaching for many, many years. He's very wide open and connected. And he said something last Sunday mornings with Rion, Sunday morning coffee or something. It's Unite the Collective. He's Team Light. He was talking about how each one of these represents an element and intent. So wind, fire, water, earth, intent. So when you're weaving and you're doing things with your hands and your line formations, when you're shooting out light and doing things, those elements are prominent in these fingers. So wind, fire, earth, air, intent. So I had just watched that and I thought, well, let me give that a shot. Let me add some fire into it, you know? So I put my hand, I made my intent to connect through a line formation to the ice cream block of ice. I held my hands around the outside. I saw the grids, and then I used the fire to heat around the outside on the lid going down, and I visualized it going down and softening up the ice cream. Okay? Pure intent, pure knowing that this happens. I might have had one little doubt, like, well, maybe this won't work. But then I quickly got rid of it, and I re-gridded, redid it, put the fire in, and then let it go. I just let it go. And I walked over and I got something, put something in the trash, just kind of cleaning up the counter for maybe less than a minute. Less than 1 minute. And I thought, okay, here we go, moment of truth. And I started to lift up the lid, and I could tell by holding the ice cream when I was pulling up the lid, I could tell something was different. And I was like, ooh, getting excited here. Is this going to be a proof? Like, sure enough, when I got the spoon, it went in like butter. There was no ice. It was not solid. It worked. It was real. And I was so happy. I mean, I knew I could do it, but it was just kind of like, yay! So turning a block of ice into a soft butter ice cream. Yay. So active practice, you guys, active practice. If you're not, you want to get to a stage like that where you can do these things, knowing and trusting in that inner world. Like for me, that was pure magic. It was beautiful. And it reminded me that we have our protective bubbles around that we can practice in our field. So why not practice? If you're outside, work with connecting, if you haven't started practicing what is your own thoughts yet, if you haven't done that yet, it's a great time to start practicing because you can do so much right now. But knowing your own power, work within your, don't work on the macro, work on the micro, work on yourself. Work on just your small area and know and trust that you can do these things. Work on the telepathy with animals and small children. Work on it with the plants. If you don't have any of that, go out and get a plant. Get a plant so you can start communication. It's sensible practice, and it's knowing that this is real. And then it's bringing that as a practicality into your bubble of reality, into your field. That is your active practice. This is practice time, guys. This is go time. No better time than now. And there's a big tractor coming up, and I hope it passes by quickly, but I wanted to remind you that Thursday night is our Galactic School live Zoom meeting. And you guys are all invited. Andrew Weston is the Galactic teacher, leader in our, running this roundtable. I'm just hosting it on my channel. So if you come over Thursday night at 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, if you want to learn more about what AI is. I've talked about this a little bit. It's the light. Light is smart and intelligent. I say this a lot now because it's important to know. If you don't know your connections, You can only visualize it if you really want to feel your connections and start doing things in your reality and practicing your skills. How do you think we get there? Do you think it's just going to be a light switch and boom, you're going to have magical powers? I mean, you need practice. You need to understand things. You don't have to understand all the language. I know it's complicated. I get that. But I promise you that you will learn more and more and more. Every day, Andrew hosts a live somewhere in the morning, maybe 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, Eastern time, over on his channel, Andrew Weston. And the more that you pay attention to the things that he's saying, even if you just follow along in the background, the more you start to pick up. And he can high-rise you. He can make all your divisions and connections and colorations and pixelates and activate, upgrade chakra systems and help all the formations that you are now moving into. And when you want to get really aligned and all of that, he does that on donation basis. So just join in the school and listen up. And if it's something that you're drawn to or you want to learn more about, you'll know. And if it's not for you, that's okay too. But I promise you, you'll understand a lot more if you start active practice yourself. And starting with meditations can help you learn about what thoughts are yours and which are not. It's so important. And Thursday night, 6 o'clock on my channel, if you hit the bell for notifications, you will know when I go live. And anybody that wants to join in the Zoom, it has, even if you just want to follow along, if you don't have anything to say and you just want to, be there to be part of what Andrew's sending out, I know he always does. He always has a surprise for us. So if you, want to join in, and even if you have questions, you're welcome to it. I will put a link for the Zoom meeting in the live chat Thursday night at 6 o'clock. So please join us, and I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful day practicing your skills. It all starts with you. I love you guys. Take care, and I'll see you soon.